The Evergreen Show, taking your business from seed to sapling to towering giant. With your hosts, best-selling author and business growth experts Noah Fleming and Shawn Veltman. This is the only show that gives you proven, pragmatic, and immediately applicable business growth strategies every week in 15 minutes or less. Here's Noah and Shawn.
Hey everybody, it's Noah Fleming and we're back. Welcome to another episode of The Evergreen Show with my co-host, Shawn Veltman. Shawn, where are you in the world?
I am in a winter wonderland right now. The sun is shining, the snow is sparkling, and the Shawn is happy.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. I hope you're going to see some sunshine soon out there in Calgary. Maybe you're going to get somewhere warm soon. I don't know. Maybe we'll bring you down here to cold Ontario for some client work. But listen, I want to do something different today. We haven't had a pre-show discussion today. We're jumping right into this. So, Shawn, I'm going to toss the ball into your court and let you decide what you want to talk about today. I know that you had a few topics in mind in our email exchange the other day, but I'm just going to toss this into your court and you set it up for the audience what we're going to chat about today.
Sure. So one of the things that I thought would be really interesting, and it's precipitated by you recently doing some work with a group of smaller companies, is, we've both got experience and we started out working with very small companies, small town companies, 1-2 locations. And we've obviously both since, grown and done a lot of work with very large companies in the 100 million and $1 billion space. But I think in many ways, a lot of the things that we learned and a lot of things that we saw with very small 1 to 10 person companies translate and are very applicable in the large companies. And I'd like to talk a little bit about that today and where you see the parallels and, where, if any place, are the major differences.
Well, you bring up something that I talk about all the time. Whenever I'm asked by anybody to say, somebody says, well, you're working with that company? How did you end up working with a company that big, right? Like, because some of the clients I work with, they're huge $1 billion companies. And I did get my start, as you mentioned, just like you, with little mom and pop shops. Anybody who would write me a check, anybody who was willing to put a few bucks into good old Noah's pockets, they were fair game for a client in the early days. But, one of the things I often say when I'm asked that all the time is that the same challenges that I'm seeing in these companies doing $1 billion, $2 billion a year in revenue are the same challenges that I'm still seeing with my smaller clients today. It's fascinating to me how much overlap there is, whether we're talking about, and I'm not sure exactly where you want to take this today, but whether we're talking about the use of tools and having a proper process in place, something we talk about a lot. Whether they're talking about the hunt for new customers versus the retaining and maintenance and nurturing of their existing customers. Whether we're talking about, employee retention or employee acquisition or customer acquisition. I find that all of these topics, all of these areas, you find the same challenges regardless of the size of business. It's just on a different scale. And to me, that's incredibly fascinating because one, we can take things we've done for smaller clients and instantly apply them to these larger clients and get the same impact. And two, we can, of course, learn from the much bigger clients and we can apply these things down. So now I'm going to flip this back to you. And is that where you want to head here today?
Yeah, and I think we'll pick 1 or 2 specific examples and look at it, but I think that's bang on. One of the things that I've often found and often said is that the difference between the $1 billion company and the $500,000 company is really just the number of employees and the time it takes to get things done, and of course the resources they have to work with. But the challenges are the same. The challenges. So let's talk about one specifically: the challenge of identifying who your customer is. This is something we talked about on our Disney podcast, but it's something that we talk about every time we start working with a new client is who is your customer? How do your salespeople know who your customer is? How would you describe your customer? How would we describe your customer, and where's the difference?
Well, it's, what that brings us back to, something we've talked about before, but it's the classic Walter White exercise, which I know we've talked about this probably on 2 or 3 of the 27 or 28 episodes of the podcast now, but I think it's worth mentioning again because it ties exactly into this. So we go into companies, big, small, large, doesn't matter. And whether working with the customer service team, the sales team, the marketing team, the leadership team, or a mix of the above, we ask them to spend 2 to 3 minutes writing a narrative of their favorite TV character. And so this is how it became known as the Walter White exercise, because the first time we did this, half the room wrote about Walter White from Breaking Bad. Once they're done that, we ask them to flip over the paper and we say, now write that same narrative, that same story about your ideal customer, your current ideal customer, the clients you have, the people you serve on a daily basis. And of course, what we find is dramatically different responses between all the executives in the room, between sales, between marketing, between customer service, between different departments. There's just these huge variations of impressions and understanding of the very people. Let's just use marketing as an example, that marketing is communicating with in terms of attracting, writing copy for, creating promotions for. And so it becomes very evident that it's very difficult to do those things well if you don't even know who your ideal customer is. So Shawn, I know you love the Walter White exercise.
I do, and that's exactly what I like about it, is watching the variation and watching people's faces when they realize that everybody else in the room has a different idea of who their ideal customer is. It really is a light bulb moment in many companies.
Yeah, it's a huge light bulb. And in fact, there's often this look of fear, right? And so we've kind of designed a number of little workshop examples of this. We do this with sales process and sales teams. And, the funny thing I'm thinking about right now is that look of dread that I often see on the executive or the president's face. And again, going back to your example, big company, large company, small company, everybody in between. I've seen that same look of dread in companies of all sizes going, oh my goodness, we've got a problem here. And so using your example, knowing who your customer is, this is one tool, one process, one thing you can start to do to see, is there this misunderstanding of the person that you're serving? Is there this sort of incongruence of who you're working with, who you're working to serve? And then you can start trying to repair this. Now, this is a process and a little tool and a little workshop that can be used in any size company. But when you talked about, Shawn, let's pinpoint this example of knowing who your ideal customer is. Do you want to take this further, or is that whetting your appetite enough?
Well, I like that. I'm going to kind of tie on to a very similar issue, and then we'll give some specific examples both from small and large companies that we've worked with around this. So the specific issue that ties to this is knowing what you sell, which seems like it should be a really easy thing. But I don't know about you, Noah. I find 70 to 80% of the companies that I work with, no matter what their size, get this question wrong of what do you sell? What have you found on this? And what does it mean to be wrong?
Well, it's again, it ties back to exactly what we're talking about. There's often this total misunderstanding on the core product, the core service, and the core customer. So that is one of the reasons why we like to ask the simple question of what is it that you're actually selling here, right? So I'm trying to think of what's a good example here. Let's just talk about your favorite restaurant. What is your favorite restaurant, the nice restaurant in town where you and your wife love to go for dinner on Friday nights and, where it's candlelit? What are they actually selling you, Shawn? Are they selling you some great meal? What are they selling you?
That depends on who you ask. If you ask the restaurant owner, he'll tell you they're selling food. If you ask the server, he'll tell you he's selling a good experience from the wait staff. If you ask me what I'm being sold, it's connection with who I'm eating with. It's a dining experience. It's the ambience of the room. It's everything that ties into making that an enjoyable 90 minutes rather than just a way to cram some grub in my food hole.
And see, that your answer there is exactly the type of response that we want our employees and our people to be thinking about. We want them to be thinking about all those extra little benefits that come from that experience. So sure, the food is important, absolutely, right? Sure, the experience, the ambiance, everything else, it all matters. But what comes from that? And so you and I were talking about the businesses that I spoke to recently, which were dance studio owners. And, you had some great insights on that, right? Because we talked about what exactly are they selling here? And we were working with them on customer retention and building a great experience in their studios. Again, very small businesses, thousands of them. But what are they selling?
And again, they would tell you that they're selling world-class dance instruction. They would tell you they're selling, their expertise. They've put in 10, 15, 20 years doing this, learning how to do it, learning how to teach it. But the real answer is that they're not selling any of that. What they're selling is something to keep a 5 to 14-year-old's attention for a 60-minute class. What they're selling is an experience. It's fun. They might be selling some ancillary skills, some confidence, posture, physical fitness, all the rest of that. Except for a very few who are going to be world class at this, they're not actually selling dance. One of the things when I was, we may have talked about this a bit before, but I've done martial arts since I was very young, right? I've done karate, I've done kickboxing, I've done full contact fighting, I've done cage fighting, I've done Brazilian jiu-jitsu. I spent a lot of time in all of these, and I've seen a lot of different, martial arts studios, and they're very similar to dance studios because most of the revenue comes from kids programs. Most of the kids who come through it aren't very good at what they do, myself included for most of this. Most of the time, what's actually being sold is a 90-minute break for parents or some of the other ancillary benefits of confidence, physical fitness, all the rest of that has nothing to do with the actual skill or the actual activity that they're doing. And 99 times out of 100, the studio owners don't recognize this. And they think that what they're doing is special, what they're uniquely bringing to it. And so that affects how they structure their program. It affects what they're creating and what they're doing to make this a valuable experience for their real customers, who are the kids or the clients who aren't necessarily paying, as well as for the parents, the people who are actually paying. So I'll give you an example of this. One thing and this was years ago when I was doing a lot of work with clients like this, one recommendation that I had was that for dance studios specifically, they should be doing short videos, minute to minute and a half videos of the student every month so that you could show progress. And at the end of the year, you can put together a nice little Christmas gift that's 15 minutes worth of progression through the year. And it doesn't matter if the kid's objectively good at dancing or not. There's some increase in skill, and everybody who sees it, who already likes and loves the kid, can feel warmth and happiness and pride and all of that. And that is a better experience. That's a better product than all of the dance skills in the world.
Yeah, but I mean, who's going to go to that much work for one client?
Yeah, that would be crazy. It would almost be like they'd want to keep them.
Exactly. And so that's the type of work that it requires and it takes. Now, again, going back to our original topic here, right? Shawn just gave a fantastic scenario, fantastic example, very tactical, very specific. Think about ways now where you could take that and you could apply that to, say, your large industrial B2B manufacturing clients. You can absolutely do that, right? You could create that same type of benefit, that same type of value, regardless of the company size. Now, of course, you're not making videos of your industrial B2B manufacturing clients dancing and giving them a Christmas card of their improved skills. But what you could show them is perhaps progress on their factory floor and how the new machinery that you built for them and that you delivered, how it changed their manufacturing process, how it eliminated their downtime. And you can start to show them all these great benefits. And so again, these are the types of things that we find, at least I do in my experience, I find that almost everything that we can do with one company that's successful, we can universally apply it to another, almost everything. And I think that's really important to think about here. Anything else you want to add to this discussion right now?
Yeah. So I'll come back and I want to tie into your example of how do you tie this into, to larger companies. So the first step is, of course, understanding what you really sell. I remember reading, and this must have been 10 or 15 years ago, and it really struck a chord with me, that in the early days, FedEx recognized that they weren't selling overnight service. What they were selling was making an executive assistant look really good to their boss. That was their product. And that it was a light bulb moment for me. You realize what they're selling isn't the product. What they're selling isn't the service. What they're selling is the benefit to, maybe not even the person who's paying the bills, but they've identified who their real client is, the influencer, whoever's making the decision, if not paying the bill, and figuring out what it means for them to be successful. So for many of our clients, especially in the B2B space where things are going on behind the scenes, what you're selling is making your buyer look really good, right? We often talk about when we go in and work with the heads of sales or COOs, what we're really selling is making them look good to the CEO or to the president. We're making them look better by dramatically increasing the performance of their department. And so that does a number of things. It means that we can do that in a number of ways. We don't have to sell a specific program. We can tailor it to whatever will be best for that company and that client. And so, as a B2B company, if you're selling saving money, if you're selling greater efficiencies, if you can find why they're actually doing business with you, then you can put more effort and investment into doubling down in those areas.
So, Shawn, you gave us some great examples today. I think you brought a great topic to the table. Can you give our listeners a challenge around that today?
Absolutely. So the challenge that I want to give is, do the work and identify what you really sell. It's not your product. It's not your service, right? Identify who is the influencer, who is your real customer, even if they're not the ones who are paying you, and figure out what you can do to stand apart from any of your competitors to really drive home the point of what you're selling, to make it better for them and to really give them more of what they want. Again, Noah, you always chide me for relying on old sayings and cliches, but they're cliche for a reason, right? So nobody buys, nobody cares about getting a 3/4 inch drill bit. Everybody wants a 3/4 inch hole. And when you can identify that, when you can identify what that is in your market and create your experience around that, you are in an incomparably better position than trying to compete on price or speed or whatever else you think might be your competitive advantage.
So I'm going to do us one little extra here, and I'm going to set us up for maybe not next week's podcast, but certainly a podcast in the future in response to your challenge, Shawn. But my business is different, Shawn.
Everybody's business is different. That's definitely a podcast of its own.
I had you stunned there for a minute, didn't I?
You did. Stunned silence. We hear it all the time. I love hearing it because I get to ask my favorite question: why? And really, what we always find when you dig deep enough, it's the same challenges because you're always dealing with people. Right? No company ever buys anything. It's always people who buy things. Your mentor loves to say, find the personal reason behind the professional reason. And when you can do that, you have an incomparable advantage.
Wholeheartedly agree. So everybody, you've got the challenge this week. Shawn, thanks for bringing this fascinating discussion to us. Hopefully I won't stun you with silence next time, but we'll bring this back to the concept of, but is my business different? My business is different. No, it's not, right? We can apply these things to big business, to small business, to all the businesses in between. We've given some very specific tactical examples of that. You've got the challenge for this week. We're over our 15-minute mark, but that's okay. Sometimes we go over. It's a little bit extra fun here on the Evergreen Show. With that, I'm going to close this out. So as always, leave us your review on iTunes. Be sure to get in touch with us. You can do that off my website, noahfleming.com. Be sure you get the weekly Tuesday tidbit read by 30,000 executives religiously every single week. And as always, take part in these challenges. You will get value from them. There's some great stuff to be had. You'll learn some things. Go back and find the Walter White exercise, a number of different things we talked about on this podcast you can try, you can use, and you can see where some of these challenges are in your company, and you can make some improvements. With that, we will talk to you next Monday. Thanks.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to join us each and every week for another great episode of The Evergreen Show with your hosts, Noah Fleming and Shawn Veltman. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate and review, and we'll catch you next time on The Evergreen Show.